Hello, my name is Rob DeHart. I'm curator at Tudor Place Historic House and Garden in Georgetown. And thank you so much for joining us for this evening's program about ancestral spaces in conversation. This is a installation and tour that we developed that we thought was going to be open from February to April. Then it got extended to June, then it got extended to November, which speaks to just how popular it has been with our visitors and our members. And so we thought the way to wrap up this very special installation was to get together the group that started it. And these are three of the people that were part of our advisory group that co-curated this installation with us. So we invited them today so we could kind of speak about the process for doing this and also think about next steps for Tudor Place as to how we want to follow up this very successful installation and keep these themes as part of our interpretation. It's the webinar version of Zoom. So if you want to ask questions, you can drop those questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You can click on it. And after we talk for a bit, I'll get to those and we will try to answer everybody's questions as best we can. So we're welcome to be here, and I want to welcome my three guests, and we're just going to go around and I want them to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their personal and or professional connections to this content that we developed at Tudor Place. So let me start with Carl. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Carl, and your connection to Tudor Place.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carl Haynes. I am the great grandson of John Luckett. John Luckett was the gardener of Tudor Place from 1862 to 1906. While he was there, he helped Britannia Wellington Peter Kennan raise her grandchildren, and he helped to shape the landscape of Tudor Place. That is my connection to the Tudor Place Foundation.
Nice. Thanks, Carl. And how about you, Lisa?
I would say I have a strong personal and professional connection to the Tudor Place project because of the connection to preserving and interpreting historic places, particularly African American history and legacy of slavery. And so my work as executive director of Black Georgetown has allowed me to delve deeply into these issues, and I was glad that we can make the connection with Tudor Place.
We are glad to. Anne?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ann Chen, great-granddaughter of Hannah Cole Pope, who was the last of my family to actually live at Tudor Place. She was enslaved. But for my family, it covers actually 3 generations of connections with the Peter family. So that this is a long-term and deep family connection.
Thank you, Anne. So Lisa, let me go back to you because I would imagine when we started this process, some of you guys were probably a little skeptical because historic houses have a bad track record for interpreting this kind of history. I mean, that's the truth, and some museums do too. When we started this process, I feel like a lot of what we did in the beginning was trust building because I think I don't know, if I was you guys, I don't know if I would really trust me to tell all the stories. So what were your thoughts when you started this project, and how did that change over time? And let me start with you, Lisa.
Well, I'll be honest, I had some reservations, and a lot of that came because of the people that I've been working with. So I've been executive director for Black Georgetown Foundation since 2019. And so just making my way and networking and finding out, all the different Georgetown sites and working with folks like, other historians like C.R. Gibbs and folks that have done a lot of work in this area already. Learning of their experiences in Georgetown, along with Anne and others, it wasn't a positive experience. when they were trying to get the information, or they were told there was no Black history in Georgetown. And so I'm hesitant because of some of the things that others have gone through in trying to share stories of Black Georgetown in Georgetown. So, but honestly, when I met you, Rob, and you presented your idea, I was like, oh, this is different. And of course I knew Anne, so anything Anne is involved in has to be legit. And so I was encouraged by that. And anytime I can get involved and lift up the stories of those who are, from Georgetown, particularly those of African descent, I'm there. So I'm just really happy that you went that direction and you did such a great job. And you were so open to people's ideas that it just, that's why we're still here with you, Rob. We're like, he's the guy, and we trust him, and we know he's authentic, and you just did a really good job. I mean, I sent so many people to Tudor Place.
I
You
know
think
you
that I
did.
I might work there? They were like, "Do you work?"
Oh, I know. And you did so much on social media. I mean, you are so supportive all through it. And I appreciated all of it. And that's so nice of you to say. And it's the way I thought of it. I thought of myself as more a facilitator in this process. And that's what I tell people, because I hope that other institutions can get that and kind of lose that whole curator facade of feeling like they have to be in control, because I really wanted you guys to feel as in control as much as I could, make things happen that you guys wanted to make happen. What do you think, Anne, about the process? And Anne's very humble. She has worked with a lot of historic sites, very involved with a lot of descendant groups. So I respect a lot of her opinions as far as doing this kind of work. What stood out to you, and what do you kind of hope could be replicated maybe by other sites about the way this project was approached?
Well, I think that one of the principles, and certainly this exhibit kept that true to that principle, was centering the African descendants. And I'm doing a parallel at another institution so that I can see the difference between working at Tudor Place and the other location. One is much larger. I think that it was the possibilities with Tudor Place are in some ways, I think, endless in terms of where you can go, what directions, we can think about in a way that I don't think that the other location has that flexibility, or that many other locations may not. There's always the concern about, well, what about our supporters? They might not, they might not want to continue to invest. But I didn't get that feeling at Tudor Place. It wasn't like, we're trampling on somebody else's interest. It really was, we were creating a narrative. I was also very excited to learn that we had a connection with Carl and his cousin. I'd always for 30 years wondered, by God, we can't be the only family connected to Tudor Place, the only Black family. And so that to me was a positive. So there's a potential here that I think allows us to consider what's next in a way that I don't think that many people have that kind of opportunity.
I agree. I think that's the thing that attracted me to come to Tudor Place. I moved here from Nashville, Tennessee. I was at the Tennessee State Museum till 2021, was the breadth of the collection and the fact the house wasn't stuck in a certain time period. So that is the thing that allows that flexibility. And I have to admit, I have to give credit to our board of trustees and also our leadership that they were not obstacles in any of this. And I think our ideas about governance have grown through this process, from what I hear from what the trustees are talking about now. So it's really expanded a lot of people's ideas about what we can do as a historic site. I want to go to Carl because Carl comes at it a little different because Carl, I actually reached out to him through ancestry.com. I saw he had traced his family back to John Luckett. I saw that he had posted an obituary, but at the same time, I was thinking I have all these pictures of his ancestor that he does not have that I need to share with him. So, and I've also learned from Carl later that coming to Tudor Place the first time was not that easy. So could you talk about that a little bit, Carl, about your first times coming to Tudor Place in the project?
So for me, as Rob said, discovering my family history had been something I'd started working on about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I started to do the digging. Because at the time, the only thing I knew was up to my grandparents on both sides of my family. And as I started to make discoveries and put the pieces together, I was able to trace back to John Luckett. I didn't realize then what I was holding on to was a piece of history that reached just beyond my family and into the history of Georgetown and the District of Columbia itself. Rob reached out to me and told me that he had photographs and things that he wanted to share with me about John Luckett that I had never seen. And I was very interested in coming to see them, but I didn't want to come alone. I wanted to have my members of my family come along and support me because I needed them there with me to share in this moment. I didn't want to carry this burden on my own. I was able to get my cousin Geraldine to come along with me on my first trip. And my first trip to Tudor Place, just so I could get a feel of what my ancestor John Luckett went through on his walk from home to Tudor Place, I intentionally parked several blocks away so I could take a piece of that walk with me as I walked up to Tudor Place for the first time to meet Rob and to see these artifacts.
Can I piggyback on something that Carl just said?
Sure.
When he was talking about knowing that there's an association, that his family has an association with Tudor Place, but not feeling comfortable uh, or at ease to to enter in. And I think about my aunt, my mother's sister, who was extensively involved in the history of Black Georgetown in terms of oral history. Um, when her on her first visit as an adult to Tudor Place, she armed herself with the whole family. I mean, I think there were like 12 of us who had to come with her. So there is this intimidation because you don't know
Right.
what you're encountering, and I don't know whether people really can can understand that. It's not like going to the cemetery, you know,
Yeah.
where your family is. This is a place where your family was enslaved or worked, uh, certainly for the benefit of the residents. So I think that there's a whole nother dynamic. So,
Mm-hmm.
and the first, I would say the first 20 years of our family's connection, I felt many ways that it was extractive. You know, there was still the emphasis on the artifacts and the connection with the Washingtons and all of that. And you just kind of go, okay, all right, you know, this is what y'all do. You know, we'll just stay steady. But I would say certainly since Rob and the current staff have come, I don't feel that way. I mean, collaboration I bring people to Tudor Place now. Sort of like I
Yeah.
walk in and go, okay, hey, this is where my family lived, for an extensive period of time, sometimes almost all their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different feel, which again, it's not intimidating at all.
I agree. I agree because once I got there and I met Rob and I met the archivist at the time, Haley, and we sat down and we talked, all of that shall we say that trepidation, it went away, and I started to share stories of the things I had learned about John, and I could see that they knew that I knew that he was my great great grandfather or great 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 grandfather. And that's how our connection, and that's how we began to collaborate. And he later on he talked to me about the project that he was coming up with you and Lisa, and I said, I'm in. That's it. I said, I'm in. I said, this is important because I had my father's father, my grandfather, he always talked about the importance of history. And if you are in a moment where you can actually help to shape history, take ownership of it and do it. And my hat's off to Rob, my hat's off to Lisa, my hat's off to Ann, and thank you all for including me in this.
Couldn't have done it without you.
Right.
I'm honored. Thank you.
And certainly Lisa. I mean,
Yes.
Lisa keeps discovering, at least for my family.
I have another headstone for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
I didn't.
righty.
It was the Nash. Yeah. Adelaide.
Ah, okay.
Nash.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a half a headstone of hers.
All right. So I mean, there's all this exchange. There's this. It's very fluid, but it's all connected. I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that.
I do too. The information, first, I wanted to say what you guys, it really struck me when you first came and you talked about being comfortable, not comfortable. And I think I've told almost every tour I've given of the installation about that, because I think it's something people need to hear. And I'll say, as a white guy, I feel comfortable in most spaces, and they just don't. A lot of people, I guess with my background, don't think about how people of color avoided certain places because of how it made them feel. I've read stories about, especially people living in the South, oh my gosh, all the Confederate monuments and things you have to deal with. And that's something that's lost on a lot of people, and especially right now in the really charged political climate where we're talking about cancel culture and all those things. And because we went through it in Tennessee, we had a bust of General Forrest, Nathan Bedford Forrest, in our Capitol. And it was always like, we're not trying to erase history. It just don't make people walk by that. The guy who founded the Klan. They finally removed it to the museum, but it was like couple decades long fight. And that's just a lesson people need they need to understand. It's been generations of this kind of conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will add that people that I was suggesting come to the Tudor Place to check out the exhibit did ask, particularly Black people, how's it going to make me feel? Will I be sad? People ask that a lot. And I was like, I think you'll learn something. We got to get beyond that.
Yeah,
'cause
I'm
Carl,
curious.
how long was your great 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 grandfather working there? Like 40 years or something?
44 years.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, and I think about my family and the fact they're enslaved, and then when they're invited back in the early 20th century, what that story became part of our oral history
Mm-hmm.
was not pleasant, which is why when my aunt decided that she was going to come, that she needed bodyguards, she needed a support system. And I don't think that people coming to Tudor Place now would feel that they would need that kind of buffer or
I
cushion.
I agree. I absolutely agree because during the time of Ancestral Spaces, I've brought several friends and members of a professional organization of mine with me to Tudor Place so that they can come and they can learn and they can see and witness what Ancestral Spaces is and how the African, the people of African descent shaped Georgetown and shaped the history of the city of Washington from a professional and a personal standpoint in several facets of DC.
Right.
Because you got to think about it, your ancestors went on to work in public education. My ancestor taught Sunday school over in Southeast DC in the late 19th century, going a little bit into the early 20th century. So you got to think lessons that have been taught from both of our families have been passed down from generations to people that we don't even know.
It's very true. It's very true.
I wonder, were there any parts of the exhibit that made you sad? I'll start with Lisa.
Hmm.
We were.
I would say the thing that did make me sad was seeing when I saw Hannah's portrait in the bedroom and knowing that she slept there, not in the bed, knowing that she was sleeping like on the floor. That kind of hit me. Um, is it sad or is it anger? I don't know. It just kind of like it's history, but it kind of. Ugh. I was like, but it's something you have to know. It's part of the story. And but yeah, I don't know but it did, though I mean the whole process, the bells ringing and knowing, this summer I went to Montpelier as well, and knowing that people just sat around waiting to be called on. It's it brings that part of history to life, and you just start yeah, you start feeling sad because you have empathy for people who are in bondage, or at least I do. And so I just start thinking of their resilience, though, because I know their stories, a lot of them. And but at the same time, I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag, I guess. Sometimes I feel the resilience, but then I'm also upset and a little sad. But I think the thing that I got most from Tudor Place is that they're human and they had good days and bad days, and they just weren't called slaves. They were people. Her name was Hannah. She was a person. She had children. She had a husband. And eventually one day, she would live in her own house and tell her own stories. Um, so yeah, it makes you think about a lot of things when you at the exhibit. You had so many things there that you walk away, and I've gone so many times that I walk away thinking about something that I hadn't thought about before at the exhibit every single time I went. Yeah.
That's so great. Wow. What about you, Anne? Is there any parts of it that are especially sad for you?
Well, I don't know whether it's sad either, because, well, and I will just say that, and I've said this with people who I've come to the house with, and Lisa mentions the bedroom, the bed. I want the pallet on the floor. I really do, because that's the real part. She did not sleep in that bed. So I think that visual to me was not there. The other thing, and I didn't realize until I guess Lisa and I were talking at some point, and she was talking about taking the tour upstairs. And I never, with this exhibit, never took a tour that went upstairs. And I can remember I'll say with another Tudor Place regime, I asked if I could go to the attic which is where I think when she wasn't on, when they, whether it was Barbara or Hannah, when they were not on call, that would have been their private space. And I just thought about how hot it had to be in the summer and how cold in the winter if you're in that non-insulated area. But that's the place where you can have your own personal time. I think that was like one of the things that I felt was missing, even if it was not that people could see it, but to say if there was personal time away from the Peter family, it was in that attic for my family. I think
True.
that's what was kind of missing for me. But
Okay.
overall, no. I mean, I thought the reality of the dining room table, with okay, this is a fancy dining room, but the people who make the meals, serve the meals, clean the dishes, all of that, this is what they would have eaten off of. It wouldn't have been anything grand. I mean, I'm sure that table in the sort of the sitting room for the enslaved and servants was probably where they did have their meals.
Right.
I'm sure, but it certainly wasn't in any way grand or even at a level that I would think that most of us do today.
I had one group bring up that they saw that as being the trauma of enslavement compared with the intact Washington artifacts. I had not really thought of it that way before. We were thinking of it more like who decides what histories are preserved. And it's like, the Peter family preserved these Washington artifacts, but to find the material culture of enslavement, we have to do archaeology. That's kind of how we were thinking of it. I thought it was really interesting when someone brought that up, and then I started using it actually on tours. I would say, this kind of represents the breaking up of the families, the trauma that they experience compared with the Peter family. And I'm sorry I didn't think of it. It turned out to be a nice analogy, a nice way to talk about that. We had so many comments about that and the portraits on the wall. Those were the two things that most people would talk about as being different. What about you, Carl? Is there any kind of sad or even like emotional aspect of the installation that you experienced when you especially took your family through?
I think for myself and my family, one of the biggest things as far as an emotional impact was, I know for me personally, was hearing the words of Hannah Nash Williams, especially at the end when she talked about that last visit to Tudor Place, and she remembered it so well. The things she said, the details she gave, it was awe-inspiring to hear. Um, to bring my mother, my brother, and my sister up there for their first trip to see Ancestral Spaces, and to stand there. We spent about, I'm gonna say, a good 20 to 25 minutes in the space with John Luckett, talking about the things that he did. Looking at the photograph of him, looking at his hands, looking at his face, talking about his walk from Southwest to Georgetown, um, roughly, we're talking what, 3 miles one way each day,
Mhm.
rain or shine.
Mhm.
That was very powerful. And then for me personally, telling his story and listening, actually standing there and listening to the recording with people, recording it was one thing, but I will say standing in the room and listening to it with my family, listening to it with strangers, listening to it with friends, definitely left a mark on me. It touched me in a different way, made me think more about what John Luckett endured in his life so that I can be here talking with all of you tonight.
That's pretty powerful.
Thank
I have
you.
to say that in the final, it's true, hearing Hannah Nash Williams' voice, that really gave a authenticity, I think, to the whole experience to people. Much
I
better than
agree.
me people. Yeah, that really had an effect. And that last the story we keep referencing there in the vestibule where she's talking about coming back as a child, that turned out to be such a great ending point. And that was something, Anne, you really emphasized. You were like, I want to do this in the vestibule because I don't think they got any further. And that was such a great idea to do it that way. People got it. And it gave us something. People then start talking about it, what this meant, what they think about this. I mean, it was a great conversation starter for people. And on my tours, I would always tell people how you said that this story was told with derision in your family because she laughs on the tape. And I said, she's talking to somebody from Tudor Place. So she might be approaching this a little bit different than if she was talking to her own family. Do you think that's the case?
I think so. I the older I get, and the more that I look at the things that we have in my family, and all of us have bits and pieces of Tudor Place, in terms of even artifacts, which we have not shared, we haven't photographed, we haven't, they're not for public display. But two items. One was a pewter set that I think came from Tudor Place. I always jokingly say that, of course, we would have gotten pewter, not the silver.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that these were actually, for I guess the Peter family, not necessarily Thomas Peter, but Patty. These were things that had been at Mount Vernon. So for her, they meant something. And so they were a wedding gift when my great grandparents got married. And that tea set, whatever it is like a whole tea set, was on in my home, it was on our mantelpiece. And I thought it was ugly, didn't know why the heck it was sitting there. And I can remember after my mother died, I packed it up and put it in a box and put it in the attic. It's like, and in fact, when I moved here to Florida, it's still in the box. It's in the garage. However, there is a chair in my living room that came.
Uh-oh.
I think we might have lost Anne for a second.
Right on the edge of my seat.
I know. I want to hear about the
Yeah.
chair.
Oh,
Am I
there she
frozen
is.
now? I think I
You're
was.
Oh,
back.
you're back.
We heard everything up
Now I
until
can't hear anybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay, if you can hear me, that's fine.
Okay.
So, this chair is in my living room. It was in Tudor Place. It's been passed down from generations. So whether it's acknowledged or not, my family lives with something from Tudor Place. And when I look at it now, I look at it differently. It's not just an old piece of furniture that God knows why have you all kept this thing and pass it down. I mean, one of the cousins has a card table. It's like, what is this stuff? But there's I guess a more real connection. And Carl, when I was walking through and saw the tools that your great 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 grandfather had used possibly as the gardener, I was like, boy, that's really something.
It was something to see for the first time, especially knowing that the site was for a
Of course.
left-handed person,
That's right.
because that was one of the questions that when I on my first visit, um, the historians of the Fran and Dave, they asked, was anyone in my family left-handed? And it also just so happens that my cousin Geraldine is left-handed. So having her there was, let's just say it was a very divine moment to see and actually look at these tools and know that they're connected to our ancestor.
Right.
That was
Right.
really cool because it not just being left-handed, that was cool, but also that Geraldine's such a green thumb and just your guys'
Yes.
history with gardening and tracing that back to John Luckett. I just can't imagine
Yes.
what that would be like, if I had that kind of connection with a distant ancestor and would be able to touch those tools and stuff. It's really, I'm so glad we could provide that, and that's the
Thank
way I
you.
look at a lot of our stuff. I feel the same way with some of the other images we have of Irish immigrant workers that were also working at Tudor Place at that same time. I think the same thing. It's like we just haven't gotten that far yet, but I would love to reach out to their descendants and be able to
Mhm.
share some of these things
Hmm.
that I'm
Right.
sure they don't have pictures either of these people. Um, let's see. Another thing that's come out of this when we talked about the audio and the vestibule, I guess was that your niece or a cousin and that had the picture of Hannah Nash Williams as a little girl that she mentions in that recording. And that's been another blessing of this installation, is that we've acquired so many cool images. That's one that I had not seen before. And we had another descendant of Hannah Pope visit from Detroit that I told you about that had images of Catherine, which I did not
Yes.
have. Have you
Yes.
been in touch with her yet?
Yes. And we've talked, and I've sent her a manuscript of the family, and she sent me pictures. I mean, there's some of the names I knew, but had no sense of what they looked like. So yeah, this week when I got back here to Florida, I opened it. I saw the picture of Catherine. I saw the picture of Alice Pignon. The Benjamin Popes, the Pope Benjamins. I mean, it just goes on and on. So we're going to have a Zoom call after Thanksgiving, and I'm hoping that all of us can converge in DC end of January, first part of February. So the two places where I know we're going is to the cemetery and to Tudor Place, because we've got to let the ancestors know that we're reconnected.
That's so
Yeah,
exciting. Yeah,
yeah.
she was just a joy. And I mean, if nothing else, I mean, that's just such a wonderful thing to come out of this process, those kind of connections. That's just great. So since we're on that, let's talk about the future a little bit. So that's been a real quandary for us. I'm trying to figure out how to keep the richness of these stories while also blending them with some of the Peter family history that we've pretty much extracted out, which I think a lot of people thought, can you tell the story of Tudor Place without those Peter family Washington? And it turned out, yes, we could, and it worked really great. We really didn't need them. But now it's like we want to try to blend some of it back in, but I don't want to lose the richness of what we did. So it's challenging. It's really challenging, and I'm going to engage all of you guys again very soon about this. But give me your thoughts on what you think we need to make sure we keep in that tour so that we don't abandon all the progress that we've made with this. I'll start with you, Lisa. What are your thoughts about that?
I've been thinking about that, and I don't have a concrete thing. Um,
I don't either, so it's okay.
I so I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I think, how do you ducktail the stories? Um, I don't know.
I don't think it's that hard.
Oh, good.
Because I
Let
don't.
Ann answer.
I never do. Because I think you can tell all of these stories. I mean, and once you've got, the European servants and workers blended in, you're talking about a full house. So that, in that kitchen, it's not just
Patty.
what was brought from Mount Vernon,
Mm-hmm.
or I think that you can talk about these people. What's their name? Britannia had the cookbook or recipes.
She had some. We've got lots of.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got recipes.
Yeah.
They're not. They're a little bit of everything. I mean, just like America is a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
You can have that table set half and half, so
Mm-hmm.
that you could show what it looks like in or what the things are that the enslaved had and what the Peters had. I mean, and of course I hope that you will put that palette in one of those bedrooms, so that people understand. Yeah, some folks are on the bed, some folks are on the floor.
Right.
I mean, I think that there just has to be, you have to open your mind to figuring out how to integrate so that all of the images are there. Because that's who lived there, who worked there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, leave the pictures up and bring the Peter folks back. They can have part of the wall too.
That's what we're thinking. I am thinking about them in the drawing room. Well, one, Peter Waddell's working on a portrait of Barbara Cole Williams, Hannah Pope's mother, because we don't have any images of her. And Ann's been involved with that. So that'll be done by then, or at least it's supposed to be. And I'm planning on keeping a lot of them. I've talked to the framer, Bill Adair, about keeping some of those frames too. So yeah, I agree. I can definitely start out that way, and we could do the integration. And we'll talk more about it. But that's great what you told me. What about you, Carl? What do you think? Would you like for us to keep? I mean, like, we used to talk about John Luckett's self-emancipation story anyway. You reading it, I think, has been very moving for people. Do you think we should keep that in there? Keep a lot
I
of
would
these
say
op-
definitely. I would say definitely keep that as a part of it because, well, that's one of the things that a lot of people have mentioned to me when I've taken the tour with them. That was one of the things they found as a very moving statement was hearing someone say those words rather than just reading them. So I know for me, it was definitely a different thing actually listening to myself say it. I would also agree with Anne that a lot of the things about her ancestors could definitely be incorporated into the tour itself because, like I said, it's not just the Peter family, it's the people who live there, the people who work there. You can find a way to incorporate all of that together into one show, for the lack of a better term, tapestry, because that's what America is. It's one big tapestry. It's not just one side of the story. There are multiple sides of the story. And if you don't tell all the sides, you don't get the complete picture. And I
Thank you.
definitely that tape of Hannah Nash Williams in the
Yeah,
vestibule
that.
has got to stay. Because, like I said, for me, that was one of the most powerful things. I know for several other people. I remember my first tour of Ancestral Spaces, the two ladies with whom I took the tour with, when they listened to that, they found that to be very moving.
Yeah. Yeah, that was universal. That was such a big part of it.
And also, I would say I know the attic may not be, sturdy enough to take people up to, but make sure that you point that out that that's where Ann Chen's ancestors slept when they weren't sleeping on that pallet.
Yeah.
Or hanging out partying in Georgetown. Yeah.
Very fun.
That's a great story. Everyone loved that too. They love that story.
Yes. That was
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts of the tour, listening to that, talking about how she loved to dance.
That's right. That's right. The other thing is if upstairs is part of the tour, and
Yeah.
I missed it, of course, you know, to have a brush on the bureau or the dresser, and you tell the story that for Hannah, it was punishment that she would have to brush the children's hair 100 times before they went to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, not knowing any connection, we were told as girls in the family that we had to brush our hair 50 times
Wow.
before we went to bed. I mean, so that there are all these little things that we can trace that were, I mean, if you get 3 generations of a family in a house, you know, by osmosis, they're just going to pick up um, practices and habits. But for a brush and you know, for a guy to say a brush like that was used, Hannah had to brush the Peter girl's hair, you know, every night before they could go to bed. I mean, it becomes, it's just not something that's sort of there as part of the decor or as a period piece, but it's part of a story of these two families.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you for sure. I'm starting to see some questions. So before I get to the question, just is there anything else you guys want to mention about that? We are going to talk again very soon. We'll talk about the future, but I wanted to get your initial comments. So one of the questions I have, Rhiannon, who I know works at the Surratt House, I believe. She asked, what insights or lessons would each share with other historic sites, hoping to connect with descendants and facilitate descendant-created exhibits? Or put another way, knowing that trust can be difficult to build and that it isn't a one-size-fits-all process, what measures, in your view, can a historic site take to foster trust? You can tell she's a museum professional just from that question. So basically, and I've met her, she's great. She's a great person, great professional. So, how do you answer that? What insights could you give her if she's like trying to reach out to descendants? I'll
Has she
start.
found any? Has she found any so far?
Let's see. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, there's a roll call, and you set up something that's not, you know, you have to be on the agenda, but just maybe a invitation to come and visit or talk, more a social thing,
Yes,
not.
definitely that.
They said they have tried, but it hasn't been successful to reach out
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
descendants. I first think uh, if you have a handle on telling the story of the descendants' ancestor, you know, some of the problems I think I can even just think with Georgetown and working with some of the historic sites. Not all are the same, and not all are trying to do the same thing. And so for me, it's important to see what you do without me there. I don't want to come in and do the work for you. That's, you know, I have my own work to do. And sometimes I feel like I get invited to the table, you know, for me to cure cancer. You know what I mean? Like, that's not my job. I can only, I can talk about those who are interred in cemetery and have some histories around that. But like, do your own homework first. Like, I think, when Rob came, of course, and Rob, Carl, they know what they're talking about. But I've worked with some other sites that are asking me more questions than I'm asking them. So if you're a big institution, which there is a big institution that I'm working with, and they really don't know anything about the enslaved people at their historic site. And so they asked me all the questions, and I'm like, I'm one person and you have a staff of 50. I'm gonna need you to do your background information. Tell me what you have. What are you finding? What are some of these people's names? And, those things. So, as so somebody reached out to me about one of my descendants, and they basically wanted me to tell them everything. That I have a problem with that. You're a historic institution. You should be, collaborating and not, um, particularly, most of these places like 200 years old. You should have something by now. And if you don't reach out to me yet.
But
That's
do
how I
your
feel.
research. Yeah, I mean, what
Do your
Yeah.
research. Yeah.
what Lisa said is do your research. I mean, there's census records. You got names of people.
They got staffs. I mean,
And
and
they got
most of these places have staff. You know what I mean? And so, like, I think that you got to do your work. It seems that when we get to African American history, a lot of times some people, don't, I don't know. They think we hold it in our head. We're doing the research as well. But I would just expect, like say we're talking about a Mount Vernon or something like that, that you would come to me and you'd have something about my ancestor before you approach me.
Tell me a story that I don't already know and
Yeah. Or if you want
invite
me,
me.
or
yeah, if you want me to work with you, you got to show me that you're, interested in collaborating and not like just exploiting my ancestor.
Mhm.
I think that's the talk in the field, especially when museums first started working with descendants. I think it was exploitation a lot of times. And a lot of times people were brought in after decisions had already been made. And it was kind of like, this is a check off sort of thing.
Right.
Like, well, we
Right.
consulted the descendant. That makes somehow legitimizing the work.
Right.
I think most have gotten past that now, but I know that was an issue in the beginning. So that was really on my mind when we started this process. That's why I wanted you guys at the very first meeting and not be something like, come in halfway through and this is what we're doing. So yeah, I think that's important. Any other questions? I don't see any popping up there. I see some attendees I know. Oh, Mark, of course, Mark Auslander, our friend,
Right.
who worked winter one. Lisa, I see you're looking at it.
Do you want to read it or?
Or I'll do it. Oh, okay, so he's getting ready, he has to leave. I did want to mention my students at American University Difficult Dialogues and Museums class found the installation astounding, considered among the strongest ever museum installations on enslavement in the United States. Wow, that's some tall corn, is that what we say? Which I concur. Having said that, we very much wonder about how to represent the post-1795 of the 11 families sold off by Thomas Peter, whose stories remain unknown. That's a great question, and we struggle with that too. To give you some background, the Thomas and Martha Peter, they inherited 61 individuals in 1795 from Mount Vernon and another 48 in 1802, and they sold most of them. So the reason we're getting to talk to Ann Shin today is that those were ones they did not sell. And they ended up living on their plantations in Maryland and in Tudor Place, but there's so many more that we don't know anything about. And that is difficult. And we found one story that is sad that I would like to find a way to work into our interpretation, where you can see there's a family that they inherited in 1795, and Thomas Peters sold two of the girls to, like teenage girls to somebody. We don't know who. We just see they were sold. But we wonder if they were sold possibly as sex workers, maybe, because they were that age. They were 14, 15. And then later on, you see how the father of this family and the mother and then a smaller child, they're sold as well. But by the time they're sold, which is a little bit later on, a couple of the family members are marked as insane or disabled. So we wonder about what the trauma did to them with these sales and the breaking up of the families to maybe cause this designation. So that's like one answer I have. It's like it's like the idea of who preserves history, that you have to look at these sources and just look for those little clues of things that you might be able to figure out from. But that's really, I mean, it's really when you think that your ancestors and knew these people, probably knew them really well, and what that might have done to even your ancestors to see these people that they may have known in their community in Mount Vernon be sent away. Do you have any thoughts about that, about how to interpret that kind of history?
Well, I mean, it runs the gamut. I mean, I think that one of the families was a Twine family.
Right.
And I think that's the one that you're probably referring to. And or not, I don't know. But I do know that when George Washington heard that that family had been sold, that he made efforts, I'm told, to try to locate them and could not.
I didn't know that part of the story.
Then there's, I mean, and I am wondering, because then, of course, there is a Twine by the same name who ends up at Woodlawn. And I'm wondering if the Peter family didn't sell them to the people who own Woodlawn, because it's all they that's what they did all the time, was trade people back and forth within the family.
Yeah.
But this guy, if he's the father, is ultimately hanged for rape. And it was like he's charged and he's hanged within a very, well, of course, a black man and a white. I don't know whether she was a young girl or whether she was a grown woman. But the name is the same. And so I always wonder if they just passed this Twine family, or at least portions of it, over to another segment of the family. I mean, those are all the kinds of, I always look for the Twines.
Yeah.
Because
We have a Twine.
it's a family. There it is.
David Twine. He was a coachman for the Smithsonian, the first 3 directors
Well, there it is.
during slavery.
And so he's coming straight out of Mount Vernon.
We have a Will Twine too. That was I don't think he was a coachman. I think he was I think he worked in the smokehouse. But Heather Bollinger, the researcher we work with, she found evidence of him at Holy Trinity, and that he had a wife and a child. So we've learned so much from those Holy Trinity records with some of these people. And it really speaks to how the Peter family or any enslaver, just they don't record these things. We have to find them other places. They talked about them as laborers, but never mentioned that he had a wife or that he had a kid or
No.
things. Yeah, it's not really part of the story for them.
Yeah, well, my hope is to take those enslavers and try to trace the people.
Yes.
I'm hoping AI technology will help us with that in the very, very near future.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Oh, we have a couple
Yeah.
more questions. Okay, I'll get to these two. I work at Woodlawn. We are working to tell the stories of the enslaved and free Black people who lived there. We would be happy to have you visit sometime. Okay, absolutely. I was aware of Peter Twine at Woodlawn, but I did not know about David Twine at the Smithsonian. So you passed along some info there. So James, definitely love to get in touch with you. Um, Kenesha Washington, I don't have a question, but I'm also a descendant of John Luckett. Carl's my uncle. Do you know who this is?
That's my niece that's in the photograph with me.
Oh, okay. On our wall at Tudor
Mhm.
Place. Okay, I had the joy of experiencing the tour with my nephew and niece. It was so amazing to learn so much about my family's history. My favorite portion was walking through the garden, imagining all the hard work it must have taken to upkeep and landscaping for 44 years. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really do. And you're welcome anytime to walk through our garden. Well, I think maybe this is a good time to close up. It's 7:30, so we've been on for an hour. I don't see any more questions. Do you guys have any last thoughts that you would like to send out before we end for the evening? Lisa?
No, I think I invite everyone to come to the cemetery and visit. We have a
Yes.
walking tour. So if I'm not there, but December 8th, we're actually having an event. It's on a Sunday at 10 a.m. With the Colonial Dames of America. The DC chapter is held a fundraiser, and we will be laying wreaths at the cemetery on December 8th. And everybody's welcome.
I plan to be there. We purchased a wreath to bring it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, we love to support you. Carl, any final thoughts from you?
Now, to anyone who hasn't started to look into their own family history, I definitely invite you to do so. There are things that are out there for you to discover, as I have discovered for myself and my family. And I am definitely looking forward to seeing Tudor Place 2025 and moving forward and doing bigger and better things than what we've done within Ancestral Spaces.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And Ann?
I would piggyback on Carl in the sense of Thanksgiving's coming up, folks. You got family and friends. You got a phone. Record those stories about different people who you don't like, things that
Mm-hmm.
have happened over time. It's oral history, it's your history. Start making a record of that. And my other suggestion is at least at Tudor Place in the late spring, we ought to have something, we ought to have a lawn party with the descendants.
Hmm. Yeah, we've talked about.
Everybody, European, African, Irish, whoever is connected to this place. And I'm saying that it's much easier when it's a social rather than a research or for something specific. Just have everybody gather. And if it has to be potluck or everybody bring a cooler, I mean, however you do it so that, Tudor Place doesn't have to fund it all. But to use that place as a focal point for all of us, I think, and for all of us to see each other. I mean, the Zoom's nice, but we're still in silos in a lot of ways. And I
Yeah.
think for the staff and for all of us, if you can identify descendants of the European servants, I mean, whoever has a story that connects them to Tudor Place, that's what I would love to see, either late spring or early next year in the autumn. And if
Great.
that's too early, there's 2026 when this
That's what I
country
was gonna
will be
say.
talking about its 250th. Let this historic house show what America is.
Yes, because As the tagline for Tudor Place says, America's story lives here, and we are America's story.
It's true. Wow, what a great way to close up. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you.
You know how much I
Thank
love
you for
working
having
with
us.
you guys, and I know I'm going to be talking to you here in the very near future and continue all the collaborations that we've done. And to attendees, thank you so much for coming and joining us in this conversation. If you have any questions that you didn't get answered here, you can find my email address on our website, tudorplace.org. Feel free to get in contact with me, the curator, Rob D. Hart. I'm happy to answer any questions. So with that, I guess I'll say goodnight, and I will see all of you guys soon.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
Take care,
so
everybody.
much.
Right.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.